Climate change, when it hits a country, everyone is vulnerable. Not only one country is vulnerable. I remember in 2022, I was in Dihad in Dubai, and I asked one of the Red Crescent colleagues, young people, to come and tell her, let's do a simulation. Let's imagine that you have flooding. And she came to the stage and she said, God forbid, we never have these things. But if it happened 20 years from now, 2 weeks after they had an earthquake. So anyway, if it's not happening to you now, it could happen tomorrow, God forbid. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that we collectively come together. So this session today, I love it because it's about giving back and because we have a very interesting group of panelists with us. I will start with Ms. Farida. Is the Director of Multilateral Economic Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Bangladesh, since 2020, responsible of issues including climate change, sustainable development goals, migration, and labor rights. It's exactly like my department. And prior to that, she was the first secretary and then counselor at the Bangladesh in High Commission in Canberra, where she was responsible for relations with Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji. She worked as the first secretary at the Bangladesh Embassy in Stockholm, desk officer for international equalization and Western Central Asia within the ministry. So please join us. And by the way, my name is Rania. I'm a director of Peace and Development Coordination, and I work with IOM. So yeah, just to know who I am. And now we have Peter. Mr. Peter is the head of the Adaptation and Resilience team at the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO. Previously led disaster risk financing and insurance for the FCDO and helped set up Center for Disaster Protection, which is great to see protection in the title. Hope we discuss protection in this forum. Aims to find better ways to stop disaster devastating lives and economies. Supporting countries to better manage disaster risk. Worked in humanitarian response for Save the Children, so you're an ex-colleague. Across East Africa, in South Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, and Ethiopia. Thank you and welcome to this panel. We also have Dimitri, I'm pronouncing it right, is working in financial markets, covering emerging markets from macro-financial research perspective, worked in major financial institutions in Paris, London, and now Abu Dhabi. As an active member of Diaspora, specializing in the development of financial instruments that could attract migrant saving in Moldova. Wow. So we have a combination of all, government, a donor, a private financial sector, and Bismarck. And by the way, you're not the only young person in the room because I'm young as well. He is opposing young, vibrant climate activists and entrepreneurship, founder of Green Storation Ghana, which focuses on restoring degraded forest and climate-smart agriculture, degraded land recovery and human mobility in the context of climate change, member of UNGA under the Adaptation, Food and Agriculture and Migration Working Group. I really have a question to young people. How do you have time and to do all this? So welcome our very nice, active panelists. And as I said, we try to make it lively. It's the end of the day. It's the end of COP. I'm sure everyone was also very busy with negotiation. But allow me. Still Thomas? Okay. Sorry, Thomas. So we have Thomas, but we don't have a chair for Thomas, so I'm a little bit worried. So Thomas, welcome to the panel. Is a managing director of the Office of Global Partnership at the U.S. Department of State. Wow, it's a very high-level panel. Has played a leading role in promoting and socializing the role of public-private partnership as a tool for advancing foreign policy. Gives lecture and talk about the intersection of foreign policy, business, and society. So welcome, colleagues. There is no gender diversity here. Really, it's very embarrassing, but it's okay. And let me start by, first of all, welcome. And if you would like to, can you hear each other? Do you have mics and everything? Okay. So my first question is to Farida. Bangladesh is one of the highest financial remittances receiving countries, and the World Bank estimates that over 22 million was sent to Bangladesh in 2020. Could you share how these remittances have been supporting in climate change adaptation in Bangladesh? Is there any evidence of impact that you can share with us, knowledge, lessons learned? Bangladesh had a very long history in that. It will be great to hear from you.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank IUM for inviting Bangladesh and also for organizing this important event on a very important topic, but often it's not, mentioned and it's not institutionalized in many countries. I mean, the contribution or the engagement of diaspora. It's important for all of us, but it's particularly important for Bangladesh because in one hand, we have development aspirations, and in another hand, we have challenges like climate change. We are an innocent victim of climate change. We have other crises. We have recently experienced or witnessed a pandemic like COVID-19. We have other natural disasters. So it's important for us to start thinking diaspora as our development partners, and we need to engage them. Mainly, diasporas are contributing to Bangladesh national development process. It started in post-independence era when we got liberation in 1971. So Bangladesh was when struggling to get recognitions from all over the world. So our diaspora contributed a lot to get the recognitions from the international community and also get funding for the reconstruction of a war-ravaged country. So we need to see a diaspora's engagement, as you said rightly, that not only from the perspective of the financial contribution, also from knowledge information. So I can say that, but since I have said that diaspora's engagement is not even institutionalized now, but we have seen their contribution directly or indirectly. Diasporas are included in the migrants because in our country, the perspectives and migrants contribution, these are well known, but the number of diasporas are basically included in the migrants. So what happens, I'm not going to the figures that how many remittances, how much remittances we got in 2020 or 2023, we receive a good amount of remittances. So it basically goes directly to the household of the migrants or diasporas. Also, rather than the community level contribution, it's mainly helps the well-being of the members of the diasporas or the migrants, their health, their educations, their households, their livelihoods. So in that way, I can say when they build a house which is resilient to climate challenges, we can say that it's a climate action from their part. And also, you say that from my experience, I can also explain one thing that when I was in Australia, I have seen that the Bangladeshi diasporas who are in the key positions of some of the institutions in the basically in food security, agriculture and water sectors, which are very important for climate actions. So they are from that agency, they are they were engaged with the Bangladesh entity for their improvement of climate resilient crops and other things, and how the water can be improved, like these things. Also, there was Australia-Bangladesh Business Council, where the trade and investment, those were going through that organizations also. So young diasporas also were playing an important role for addressing the digital divide. So I can say that in Bangladesh, these remittances plays very important role in climate actions, basically the locally led adaptations, and also through information, knowledge, and other things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Farida, for sharing that. I think it's very important to see how a country like Bangladesh has been using and leveraging the power of a diaspora. But moving from Bangladesh to Moldova, and maybe let me ask Dimitri, the Moldovan diaspora has been particularly active in policy, advocacy, supporting local entrepreneurship. The DAR 1+3 initiative being in a case, in a point, as a good model of how diaspora can particularly contribute to the development project in Moldova. It will be great if you can share your experience, your knowledge, any lesson learned on how can this be used in the context of climate change and climate action, and any recommendation that you can give from the whole experience to our colleagues and audience.
Thank you for inviting. I'm a final guy, so for us and my colleague is very pragmatic. So if we can collect some money or if we can channel money to change something, then it can be done. If not, if no money, then nothing can be done. So the project, which is called our 1+3, is inspired from a crowdfunding type of project that has been run by UNDP earlier, and by another member of Diaspora, like even like a few years earlier. So the point is like, imagine you contribute $10, the government contributing $100, the development partner contributing $150. So in the end, what is happening, you kind of trying to collect so much money by a crowdfunding platform and trying to channel it in some important project. However, there is a big issue in a sense is how you select this project that has to be interesting for diaspora members, because it's one thing when you do a project that is very abstract, and that one is when you do something that is more pragmatic and targeted. And anything related to, let's say, to energy, which had been an important topic after the Russian-Ukrainian war, though we have kind of observed like anything that's related to energy, like that can kind of minimize the consumptions of energy is important. So now most of the projects are directed to those kind of panel solar, energy efficiency mechanism, and all those things. But the most important thing is like everything has to be really, really approached from pragmatic point of view, like not really throwing money on project that, maybe they're important, but has no impact on the environment or the villages or things like that. So as advice, at least the way we would run if we could have even more money is to really identify the mechanism and identify the project that can have a meaningful impact. Otherwise, if you cannot report the result, if a villager cannot see the way that the consumption of electricity has decreased in the within 1 or 2 months, then they lose interest. And if you lose interest, then you cannot collect more money afterwards. So yeah, in my opinion, it's like fast. It's all about money, and the second is about having the targeted project where you can have meaningful impact as soon as possible.
Thank you so much for mentioning impact. And if it's not working in 2-3 months, then we have to shift, because we cannot have the same thing happening for years and years and years, and we continue saying it will work. So thank you so much for stressing on that. And this brings me to Thomas. And Thomas, the US has been proactive in providing platforms for diaspora, for the voices to be heard, for opportunities to engage, but also challenges directly affecting the communities they have been part of this discussion. So the Diaspora Voices webinar touch on topics including food security, oceans protection. How have these interactions helped to inform US government thinking and policy priorities on climate change?
Check. Yep. Thank you so much. Thank you for IOM for hosting this important conversation. From a US perspective, similar to my colleague in the UK, we are obviously host of a lot of America's takes pride in its diversity of diaspora communities from all over the world. And so we view, from a policy perspective, we view diasporas as partners and engaging with them and collaborating with them on multiple issues, not just foreign policy, but development outcomes and what have you. So with the partnership that we have with IOM on the Diaspora Voices, what we've done is essentially do a strategic outreach to diaspora communities to hear their perspective in terms of what their thoughts are for the policies that we're putting together or the development interventions that need to happen in their own countries, and how we could view that, how could we take that as an input. The other element of it is the partnership element of it. Sometimes just listening to diasporas are not enough, because we view them as partners. So What are the interventions that they have in mind? Not just saying we would like these kind of policies to be put in place in these places, but what are they willing to do? Now, sometimes, what do they say? Talk is cheap. We want them to walk the talk. So we view them as a credible partner that we can collaborate with. So that's the way we view diasporas. And we've done a lot of work. And climate is obviously the new application that we're using for diasporas. But we've done this for years on economic growth, agriculture development, and frankly, any engagement that you do with diasporas will relate to climate. Climate is no longer just a topic on its own. It's now a broader, it affects everything. It affects agriculture, it affects health and what have you. So we view diasporas the same way we view private sector institutions, foundations, faith-based groups, the entire kind of fabric of society. And so that's the kind of respect and kind of regard that we have for diasporas.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And partnership, which is great. And we are these days talking about the global stocktake. And I think that one of the findings is how to expand partnership beyond the normal. The normal humanitarian sector coming together, speaking the same language, is not working. It's really important to scale up to diaspora, remittances, private sector, etc. So thank you for raising that. And now to Peter, the country that is home to some of the largest diaspora communities globally, the UK. So the UK government recently have actually published white paper on international development, emphasized on the commitment to help increasing the impact of remittances flow, influence policy and regulation that impact the cost of sending remittances, and work with migrants and diaspora communities to help channel remittances into causes that need capital, which is great if this happens effectively. So please, if you can tell us a little bit about that, and how can this be tackled to support climate change action, and how the UK might operationalize this commitment, and if there is any best practices, lessons learned, so we can all learn from as different communities around the table.
Great, thank you very much. So, so our international white paper is our sort of new political mandate on what we're going to focus on going forwards. Climate change is at the heart of that, and then the different various, private finance amongst other things, but remittances is a huge kind of funding flow. So over $600 billion a year, which is far more than international aid, far more than foreign direct investment. It's a huge amount of money, and this can have a real effect on climate, just because you're supporting vulnerable groups and increasing their resilience to climate change. I think there are sort of challenges around the amounts of money and how the money is transited, and the UK is a large net sender, as we refer to it. Really taking on board the kind of challenges about how the money is transferred, and then potentially support on kind of how, or messaging around how it might be spent. We're looking through kind of new opportunities with data and technology. We've got an early stage pilot program around kind of innovative ways of sending money, making it so that larger percentage of the money actually transfers rather than the cost of transfers. And we really see the more kind of money that's getting transferred through remittances, people aren't sort of naturally going to create their own resilience and adaptation. Like, this is not something we need to go and tell them to do. Like, people are not, they want to kind of improve. But where we can play a role is alongside the remittances, kind of talking about the most effective kind of investments that they might be able to make in climate adaptation. So drought resilient crops, for example. So rather than sort of potentially them going for more traditional crops, which are more kind of vulnerable to climate change, like kind of how we're sharing that information and that data kind of using kind of modern technology. And we're really delighted to be partnering kind of with IOM. We worked with them on the Global Compact on migration back in September and things. I think there's a real kind of going hand in hand with kind of, the UK is willing to kind of support kind of more orderly and supportive movement of people, but actually kind of as the climate changes, there's going to be more and more migration, but actually how we can support countries, people to stay where they are and actually be able to adapt and build their resilience to climate change, and how the diaspora can play that kind of supporting role. We're very keen to sort of, as the UK, lean in, particularly around remittances, but also the kind of wider architecture.
Thank you so much. And this is not the end. We'll come back to you. But before coming back to you, and I would like to hear from Besmark. Besmark, you cannot say there is no youth engagement in this COP. You guys are in every event. You have your voices heard. You've been calling for more action. But we also heard from you in COP lots of great ideas, engagement, experiences. You also been part of the Kampala framework coming from Ghana. So it would be great to hear from you. How can you see, after hearing from donors, countries, private sector, how can you have an effective role? How you see youth engagement? What are the ways you think diaspora and diaspora particularly could add value to this effort? And if you have any examples that you can bring to the table to educate us all.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. I want to first thank IOM for giving me this platform, uh, having this panel, this high-level panel discussion, and involving a youth to be part of the discussion. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I would say, let me delve into your question. According to statistics, in 2022, the global population was 1.2 billion, and the African youth population was also 258 million, which represent 42% of the African population. And these figures that I've highlighted shows the significant presence of young people in the world, especially in Africa. And also, it shows that there is the need for people to invest in young people or in youth development, and also empower us to contribute to sustainable and inclusive growth. Yes, so from my perspective, I think there are a lot of channels and there are a lot of means of engaging the youth, but I'll mention a few. I'll mention policy and decision making. I think we should create a platform where we can engage young people to directly have an engagement with the policymakers, and also, I mean, have the chance to hear young people's voice and include our perspective in decision making. Also, I would mention supporting youth-led initiatives. So young people need that support to actually, I mean, come out with a lot of innovative ideas, come out with a lot of innovative solutions. They are already there, but I think they need that support also to actually move forward. And I think that is also a means of engaging the youth. Coming to the diaspora, I know a lot of youth are in the diaspora. They have that unique strength. They have that unique capability to actually enhance youth engagement. So one of the ways that they can engage youth is actually supporting youth back home with finance and their technical expertise. I mean, assist them technically, so that youth back home can also have the strength and the capability to champion climate action. Another thing that I'll talk about is knowledge sharing. Um, the youth in the diaspora can collaborate with the youth at home to share their knowledge and network together to actually build more resilience to this climate action that we want to take. And the last one I'll talk about is advocacy and raising awareness. So the youth in the diaspora can collaborate with the youth at home to build more force to advocate for youth inclusion in policy making and decision making. And also, because of the force, they can have that chance to actually advocate both locally and internationally. Yeah, so this is what I'm talking about.
Thank you so much. And I think that the peer-to-peer support, people at home telling people outside what's happening, is extremely important. I've been sitting in lots of meetings When you tell people the story, they don't recognize it's happening. They cannot imagine it. When they hear each other from the same country, I'm sure it will have a huge effect. Saying that and talking about young people as a cornerstone in every action, let me go back to Farida and ask her about Bangladesh's recent national plan, which really emphasized and recognized the importance on local-led action. Community engagement, local-led action, intervention that led by the community and community leaders. And we've seen in COVID how community leaders and community-led action supported the whole of society approach. If you can share with us how diaspora contribution at a local level be better integrated into the plans of scaling the cooperation and coordination.
Thank you. Yes, we have the Global Center on Adaptation. We have the locally led adaptation hub, global hub in Bangladesh, acknowledging the the pioneership or leadership in the adaptation activities, because it is the local people who innovate and who also contribute to who works in the front lines. So rather than speaking to the how, what they have done, I just would like to highlight that what we need to do to bring diasporas to leverage their contribution in the locally led adaptation or whatever form. I said in the beginning that it's very important for us, that's why we have recently drafted diaspora policy with the help of IOM. I thank IOM for that. So in that policy, we have recognized these challenges and we have identified how we can leverage their potentials. Bangladesh is going to graduate from the LDC category in 2026, and we have an aspiration to be a smart developed Bangladesh by 2041. So that's why, because you said that the traditional partners and also the ODA, these are declining. So we need to find out how others can contribute. So diaspora is a big, there's a big opportunity and potentials to tap their potentials. So considering that, we not only for the climate change and locally led adaptation, in the how we can, I thought that we need to, in a very systematic way, we need to first recognize them as the young gentleman here said that we need recognition, we need support. So first of all, we need to recognize their contribution. Sort of recognition should be there to make them more encourageous to come forward. And then we need to connect them, because we do not have data, we do not have evidence, and for mapping them, we need a strategy. And after that, we need to support them, facilitate them when they want to come, because we have seen that from abroad, since I have the opportunity and I have the privilege to work in the embassies or consulates in Bangladesh consulates or embassy in abroad, we saw that they have the interest to come forward, to contribute, and they are contributing, but their contributions are not recognized institutionally. So that's we need to do. I think the social media and other can play a very good role, and also some sort of platform, like economic platform or other sort of platform to come forward, and then we need to incentivize them. In Bangladesh, we have a program like CIP, commercially important person, we give recognition to them. So these are the things that we need to work on it to have the contribution of diasporas. You said that in locally led adaptations, from abroad, we got so many information, technical know-hows, and the current development from our community, Bangladeshi community. And we feel proud that in many of the countries, developed countries like Australia, New Zealand, USA, Canada, they are contributing a lot, not only in the country of origin, in the country, their host countries. So we have to work out all together with the whole of society and whole of government, for not only local level, also regional and international level. So I think we need everyone, the donor, development partner, and other countries, private sector, everyone needs to give emphasis on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Farida. And yeah, no stress on the donors, but we will come to Thomas and ask him this question. The US has been supporting diaspora engagement in humanitarian and disaster response. What lessons can be drawn from your past and ongoing partnership with the diaspora? And after hearing Farida, what can you share with us to support communities like Bangladesh and others to enhance the knowledge, the awareness, the learning, the evidence, everything she tackled to ensure that they have the tools to allow them to scale up this kind of partnerships?
A great question. On the humanitarian side, I actually worked on the disaster response years ago in Haiti, the flooding in Bangladesh, the earthquake in Pakistan and other places. And what we see is that diasporas are always the first responders when it comes to resources because of the families and the linkages that they have. So we've seen the speed that they respond, and obviously the sustainable element of their engagement is what makes us why we engage diasporas when it comes to disaster. And finding mechanisms, always a difficult thing when the connection between diasporas and their home countries is personal. How does then donors get in between a personal connection between families and what have you? From a disaster relief perspective, that's the element I'll talk about. In terms of the support system that we can provide, we've had a lot of experiences of working on programs that incentivizes diasporas, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship. If there are diasporas who would like to create an enterprise to create jobs, we've done competitions. We did this in Haiti. We've done it in Africa with USAID. We've done it in the Pacific Islands with the recognition that these diasporas, with the affinity that they have to their home countries and the risk appetite that they have, they would be able to move very quickly. There was an entire concept. There was actually a white paper that was written that emphasizes that, a lot of countries do a lot of work in attracting FDI, foreign direct investment. We were making the case, especially in vulnerable economies, when FDI is very difficult to attract. They need to be emphasizing what we call, instead of FDI, DDI, which is diaspora direct investment, to make sure they do that. But since this thing is being hosted in the Ghana Pavilion, I must give credit to the government of Ghana, who did an amazing work in mobilizing the diaspora and redefining what diaspora means. I don't know, some of you are aware of, Ghana had this thing called the return to actually encourage African Americans whose ancestry goes way back, who incentivizes and created these festivals, these drives to get the African American community to return, to invest, to visit, to reconnect to Ghana. So these are modalities that you could do. Sometimes you don't just engage diasporas in the times of need, in the time of disaster. You need to be fostering these relationships in the normal times. Because when you need them, you don't just then say, we need you for these reasons. You need them 365 days of the year, 25 hours of the day. So I always encourage governments to essentially view diasporas the same as they view investors, whether they're foreigners or what have you. Because there are instances where you see, and I'm not going to name countries, but diasporas feel sometimes, some of the complaints that we receive, diaspora communities telling us is that when they go home, they are mistreated because governments view them as, you come home, why should I incentivize you? This is your home place. But they were like, but you're treating foreign investors better than you treat me. And because the capital they bring in is a foreign capital. They just happen to have affinity to the place. So I think the incentivization that needs to happen by governments needs to view diasporas at least at the same vein as incentivizing foreign investors. So that would be my view on that.
Very well said. Thank you, Thomas. And I think, diaspora is not just a channel of fun. They are investors, they are consumers, they come for tourists, but they're also the voices of their countries of origin everywhere. They advocate for their countries of origin everywhere. So definitely they have to be looked at as in a different box rather than a box of bringing money. And this brings me to Peter to tell us, how do you think a government like the UK can facilitate the learning process and better work with countries of origin and their diaspora in the UK towards common goals? And if there is any learning, any example you would like to share with us?
One of the big drives the UK is taking at the moment is this kind of locally led adaptation approach. So really kind of working with people on the ground and really kind of learning from them and building into kind of wider adaptation approaches. And this is really, can be a really critical part to kind of how diaspora can play a role, particularly around kind of migration and both remittances, but also knowledge. The event we co-hosted with IOM back in September, the Global Compact on Migration, this brought together kind of lots of experts from kind of different backgrounds and things, particularly include Diaspora. And what the panelists were specifically talking around is kind of how they can play a real role in climate change, and both kind of sharing their knowledge in both directions, kind of their host country, and also, you know, where they're playing a hugely important role and sort of can really influence or potentially influence kind of on what is happening back in their own home, learning from their host country, and vice versa. So taking that messaging back to their country of origin. And I think that kind of two-way exchange of knowledge, but also kind of for us when we're sort of designing programs and things, and understanding what is the more effective way to kind of deliver that is something that we can really sort of learn from. I can't think of any kind of specifics. We don't kind of think of specifics on diaspora specifically, but certainly kind of our locally led projects. We've got a number of kind of pilot projects that are working kind of in countries, but also kind of that we're sort of testing on the ground, and how we can work out how money flows. What's the most effective way to get money flowing, be it from sort of, you know, through government systems like social protection systems, or kind of potentially how potentially to find, as I mentioned before, kind of information that can go alongside remittances. So not suggesting that we in any way sort of intervene in the remittances. We talked about kind of, you don't want to come between. Sort of the whole point of that flow is that it's kind of, it's natural flow from families and things back to their sort of country of origin, but how can you sort of use data and technology to kind of support them, how they might better invest that, for example, or how kind of where they can play their own role in kind of climate change. But that kind of will only work, you know, it doesn't work for it to be a top-down approach from the UK, for example, to say in Ghana X and Y will work with, be it cash transfers, be it sort of other social protection methods, but actually how can we learn from the diaspora on what will work in both directions?
Thank you so much, Peter. And it's important to not to stop here on sharing lessons learned, because it's useful for everyone. It has to continue, and I don't know how we can document all these lessons from different countries to allow other countries to learn and expand on that as well. Saying that, I think that this COP has a lot of pressure on private sector. So let me talk to Dimitri and look to you and ask you a question. How do you think the government could encourage further diaspora engagement and partnership in climate action, particularly with private sector? What role can private sector play in this partnership? And in your opinion, if you can give us some key conditions for successful partnership between diaspora and private sector.
I think in the case of the Republic of Moldova, it's quite simple. In a sense, we don't have pension funds, and some of the migrants or the diaspora member abroad, they don't have access to the social security. And on one hand, this is one hand. On the second hand, on the other hand, we, you know, all the climate-related projects, they need long money, something like more than 7-8 years. So all the solar panels, they have to break even more than 8-9 years, for example. So if the government can, at least in Moldova, they can use some of the units of investment vehicles where the diaspora member can kind of place some of their savings in that fund, which can call it pension-related climate fund, and keep it there for, let's say, for 10 years in exchange for some tax measures, like say, if you keep it for more than 10 years, you don't pay any taxes on the capital gain, and this money can be channeled to anything related to the climate. So in this case, you can say that you can bring diaspora, you can bring government, and then the private sector as well, where the private sector can be kind of encouraged to contribute to that climate pension fund to somehow, and development partners. So and then you end up with the kind of the finance that is blended between private and public, and you know, diaspora members, which can have like the interest rate or like the financing cost significantly lower than on the commercial basis. But on the other hand, you also solve the problem that diaspora members have, like they don't have pension, they don't have access to social security, but they have somehow to secure their future when they come back. But on the other hand, also you can kind of change something related to the climate, especially on energy security, which is quite important in Moldova for the moment after the war. So in my case, it's quite simple. It's a pension fund, long money placed for particular target or objective, which in this case would be climate, in exchange for some tax facilities.
Thank you so much, Dimitri. And it's really a lot of learning in this room, and it will bring me to the representative of Ghana in the room today, which is Bismarck. If you can, after listening to all these experiences, learning, and I'm sure you've been going around, especially in our pavilion. So it's really important to hear from you. How can you take all this and go back? And share with your colleagues and young people what opportunities and barriers do you see for working with the Ghanaian diaspora youth on climate action? So basically, you learn a lot, and this is the homework for you.
Okay, so from the submissions of my senior colleagues, my seniors, I see a lot of opportunities for young people back home. The engagement of youth or diaspora from the US and the UK shows clearly that if a program or a project of D4C is being run, it can give young people the opportunity to connect with diaspora, exchange of knowledge and networking, supporting youth-led initiatives back home, and also having that platform to build capacity from their technical expertise or technical expertise coming from diaspora. So these are the few opportunities I will lay out that we could get back home. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't. You have a question? Perfect. Suggestion, please go ahead. Would you like me to? Yes. Is it?
So just to add to what Besmark was saying, I would also like to add that we could also take advantage of students in the diaspora. For example, if we have students in the UK, IOM could make use of them so they could form more like an organization or a group where they get to understand the need for them to even help people who are suffering here in terms of climate crisis, so that they don't feel like there's a pressure on them to contribute. Because if people do not understand why they need to support, then there's going to be some sort of difficulty, and they feel like, why should I do this if I'm also struggling myself? So I think there's a need to even collaborate with students out there, and also to add, there's a need to take advantage of art, storytelling, so that people, I think it's a way to also project whatever is happening in Ghana or in Africa to the diasporas, so that it's not just about the programs we have in Ghana, such as the Ghana Beyond Aid, but they get to understand or connect emotionally to whatever is happening. So I think there's a need for young people to also take advantage of art and storytelling in this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is an amazing idea because, yes, true. If you are not living in the place, you don't know what people is going through. So thank you so much for sharing that. I don't know if anyone want to share anything, or shall we give it a close? No one. Okay. So I basically thank you so much for sharing this. It was interesting discussion with an interesting group of panelists. And what I hear is climate action is a whole of society action. It's no more UN, humanitarian sector, the government. It's every one of us has to put hand in that. Partnership, 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 but respectful and strategic partnership, not just partnership. I love the impact and the flexibility of moving in 2 months. If it's not working, then it's not going to work. So let's change the approach and make things work. This flexibility, this agile is extremely important. It's important from the donors, from the people work on the ground to make sure that things changing so fast, especially in multiple crisis environment that include climate change. Young people, cornerstone in everything we do. I think that this is very clear, but I will add to them also women group, community leaders, community-led actions, which is actually extremely effective. It's probably the only way. We cannot work in a community We cannot be in another country and provide policies and action to be suitable for a certain community. Awareness, using every kind of innovation in awareness. It's not just going and give awareness session or sharing flyers. It has to be stories about real people, peer-to-peer support, but also capacity building. We think people know, they don't know. They want to know, they don't have the know-how. They want to help, but they don't. I always call it global initiative with local hands, and this is the way to go. Evidence and data, and the power of evidence and data in looking into trends, context, culture, environment that can help us to leverage and support people on the ground. And at the end of this, I think the knowledge that we get from every country is extremely important. What happened in one country affects other, but also the knowledge and the successful experiences in one country can have leverage a great time and effort and money for other countries to support. So thank you all for being with us here today, and thank you for. Okay, there is a video that we need to show, so I take a photo and take the photo because. So maybe we can see the video and then we can take the photo. Video. And let me see.
I'm Elizabeth. I'm part of a global diaspora network of experts who advise the Jamaican government on development and environmental policies. I champion the role of women in science and the involvement of local communities in identifying solutions that strengthen climate resilience. I help my community there to respond quickly after disaster and to build resilience.
Hi, I am Gideon, an environmental activist.
I'm Elizabeth. I'm part of a global diaspora network of experts who advise the Jamaican government on development and environmental policies. I champion the role of women in science and the involvement of local communities in identifying solutions that strengthen climate resilience. I help my community there to respond quickly after disaster and to build resilience.
Hi, I am Gideon, an environmental activist and food systems doctoral researcher in the UK. I work to empower Ghanaian youth to take climate action in Ghana. Climate change, deforestation, and water pollution are affecting nature, livelihoods, and access to healthy food. I believe in the importance of empowering local communities and holding decision makers accountable.
Hi, I'm Shihab, co-founder of a group of Bangladeshi diaspora professionals and leaders. We have a shared commitment to reduce the impacts of climate change in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is one of the world's most affected countries by climate change and disasters, but at the same time a global leader in locally led adaptation. We shouldn't wait for a disaster to happen. We should act now to build resilience.
Climate change is affecting every corner of the world and is shaping human mobility. But migrants are also powerful agents of climate action. IOM's Diaspora for Climate Action project is already supporting Jamaican, Ghanaian, and Bangladeshi communities in the UK to be part of key national and global conversations around climate change. Diasporas are untapped resources of global connections, ideas, and skills that can benefit both countries of origin and residence. Diaspora voices must be heard.